Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. The Alchemist. By Paulo Coelho. The Alchemist, written by Paulo Coelho in 1988, has become a modern classic. As of this writing, it has been translated into 67 languages, including English. Originally written in Portuguese. His novel, like many others, had a difficult time finding a publisher. After a few years of stagnation in sales, President Clinton provided a lucky break. He was seen with a copy of the book in his hand as he stepped off of Air Force One while he was in office. It took him a long time to find a publisher, as it does for many other authors. After a lull in sales for a few years, President Clinton provided a much-needed boost. The president was seen carrying a copy of the book in his hand as he stepped off Air Force One during his time in office. "Your book doesn't have a better recommendation than that." Sales surged. The author claims that the novel is an allegory of his own life narrative. It's the tale of a young shepherd who sets out to find a trove of gold. He had a dream about a buried treasure near a pyramid while caring to his sheep. Despite the fact that his life is taking the direction he hoped it would, he is nevertheless restless. When he meets a fate teller and an exiled king, they both tell him to continue his pursuit. This is why he sells his sheep and sets out for Egypt in a caravan. He runs into an alchemist in training along the road. Consequently, he begins to question his mission. Then he meets a girl and develops feelings for her. As part of his personal legend, she tells him to find his treasure. He can then return to her, his work completed. He departs with the alchemist who had been training the student alchemist who had accompanied him so far. More adventures ensue, the child gains alchemy skills, and the search for the wealth continues. One of the robbers had also dreamed of a buried treasure while sleeping in the same area as him, and the two were confronted by the bandits. When the youngster first experienced this dream, he slept under a tree that was buried beneath it. So the kid returns to his hometown, locates the riches, and weds the girl he met there earlier. Because he didn't give up until he met his personal legend, he has a happy ending. Santiago is the name of a young shepherd in the beginning of the story. After this, he is referenced only once in the course of his story. He is referred to as the boy from that point on. Because he could breed, he was a unique sheep farmer. To become a priest, the boy's parents enrolled him in a seminary. Latin, Spanish, and religion were some of the subjects he'd studied. But he wanted to see the world. As his father had said, becoming a shepherd was the only way to earn a living and roam freely. Wool was sold by shepherds as they journeyed from town to hamlet. He met a lot of interesting people on his journeys and mastered the art of sheep communication. He was able to decipher their needs by interpreting their nonverbal cues and vocalizations. Having spent a lot of time in nature, he was able to decipher its language. In the beginning, he had begun to understand the language of the cosmos. It all started one night while he was sleeping under a sycamore tree in an abandoned chapel. He kept having dreams of finding an Egyptian treasure beside the pyramids. For him, the dream was an inescapable need that kept him up at night. In town to sell his wool, he saw a gypsy woman who was able to give him an interpretation of his dream. Because he didn't want to risk losing the few money he had on her, he decided to at least inquire about her pricing. She grabbed his hand and ordered him to go to Egypt, adding that if he recovered his treasure, he had to pay her 10% as compensation for her reading. So, he headed off to locate a pleasant spot to watch the sunset and read a book he had just traded for, reasoning that she was probably telling the truth to him. Soon after, a man joins him on the couch. As he watches the youngster, the father says he's already read the book he's looking at. After that, the man starts to explain the plot and conclusion of the book to him. He's told by the man that it's a book about inability of people to choose their own personal legends. Everyone ends up believing the world's greatest hoax. Throughout the book, the word personal legend is always capitalized. Which is the biggest lie in the world? Unable to believe what he was hearing, the young man inquired. Essentially, it boils down to the fact that at some point in everyone's lives, they lose control over their own destiny. That's the greatest hoax in the world. While fate allows you to be controlled by life, you are in charge of your own destiny. Everyone has an idea of their own personal legend or goal when they are young, but life gets in the way and they blame it on fate. They don't pay attention to the world around them. He says that if you genuinely want something, the universe will conspire to help you get it. The rest of the novel is based on these few sentences. When the youngster sees the man's gold armor, he assumes he's a king. Melchizedek, the king of Salem, is revealed to be the individual in question. In order to discover his own personal legend, he assigns the youngster the task of tracking for the fabled wealth. The king informs the kid that whenever he needs him, He will be there, and the youngster often hears his voice in his brain and even thinks he sees indications of Melchizedek in those who support him on his quest. Later, we find that Melchizedek played a significant role in sending other heroes on their quests in search of their own personal legend. There have been successes and failures. There are several detours and pauses in the book's journey to get the treasure. The king's suggestion to follow the omens keeps the child going. According to Melchizedek, if he pays attention to the universe's signs and omens, he will always be on the right road. After selling his herd, he purchases a ticket to Africa. In spite of the fact that it's only a short journey, watching his own country fade away and the coastlines of Africa materialize as a significant change in the path. He's going somewhere no one else has gone before. When he first arrives in the city, he is taken aback by the unfamiliar sights and sounds. A young man approaches the youngster in a restaurant and offers to help him. This young man speaks his language, so even if his intuition tells him otherwise, he continues to go with him, despite the universe's warnings. A young man, on the other hand, takes all of the boy's money and abandons him in the street. He gets a job in a crystal shop after impressing his boss. It takes some time before the shopkeeper starts to trust him and appreciates his help, but at first it's only dusting the crystal for him as a thank you for his help. The young man aids the merchant in developing sound business strategies that eventually lead to financial success. As visitors make their way up the mountain, he sets out the finest crystal for sale, and then begins pouring tea in crystal cups. Customers buy the cups because they like the way their tea looks in them. He is able to turn the company around and make enough money to either return home or continue on his travels by working hard and listening to the crystal. His king had bestowed upon him 2 precious stones. Urim and Thummim were the names of the instruments. Each has a black yes and white no button. Although he had access to the stones while residing with the crystal trader, he never gave them a second thought and never used them. The boy now notices them in his pocket as he contemplates the best course of action. There's a man in an Englishman's place in the queue for the caravan. The dad is engrossed in a book, so the youngster joins him in his reading. His decision on whether or not to return home and acquire more sheep is still up in the air. Englishman identifies Urim and Thummim stones used by prophets and inquiries about them with the young lad in question. This is a great icebreaker for making new acquaintances because it leads to many more. The alchemist will be found by the guy. He's been studying for years, and he's studied with some of the world's top teachers. In order to continue his studies, the Englishman has brought a trunk full of alchemical books and believes that he can only learn from the best alchemist who has ever lived. The Englishman is confident that he can track down the individual and persuade him to take him under his wing so that he may be trained. To go to Egypt, the youngster and the alchemist in training set off over the desert. Meeting the Englishman must be an indication to continue to the pyramids and not return to the sheep yet, despite the long and risky journey over the Sahara Desert. Along the process, they benefit from one another's experiences. The Englishman brings books for the boy to read, while the Englishman attempts to listen to the sounds around him. The youngster learns about alchemy from literature, while the Englishman learns how to listen to the cosmos by watching the weather, talking to the caravan leaders, and riding camels. The guy meets his teacher and the youngster meets a female as they arrive at the oasis. Fatima is the name of the girl. Every day, he sees her at the well and spends time with her. He asks her to marry him in front of her family. He's debating whether or not to stay with her and give up on his own legend. She, on the other hand, claims to be a lady of the desert and encourages him to carry on with his search. She'll wait for him, and she'll do it patiently. When he gives up his dreams to stay with her, she understands that he would become miserable and resentful of her. She has faith that he will return to her because they are in love. When he meets the alchemist, he is still undecided about separating from her. He comes charging in on a massive stallion, and at first glance, he appears pretty intimidating. He recognizes his knowledge, though, as he begins to converse with him. According to the alchemist, a sincere love cannot put a halt to one's quest for a personal legend. If it does, then the relationship is not genuine. It was with this knowledge that alchemy's newest trainee was introduced to his mentor, who then tasked him with beginning work on his personal legend, turning iron into gold. The task excites the Englishman, who jumps right into it. The youngster, on the other hand, is the real alchemist's apprentice. In exchange for his services, he promises to take the youngster across the desert. To help him along his journey, the alchemist teaches him how to communicate with the desert. An important lesson is learned by the boy. Dreams and wishes fill the little boy's heart, nevertheless he believes like his heart is disloyal. It tells him that he has found true love and that he should return to it and abandon his search for it. Finally, as he continues his journey, his heart admits that even though it sometimes moans, it is content. Their path crosses with a tiny band of desert resistance fighters. They uncover the Philosopher's Stone and the elixir of immortality in the Alchemist's lab. The rebels don't believe the alchemist when he tells them what it is. The moral of the story is that no matter how much you attempt to convince others of the greatness of your own inner resources, they will never believe you. The language of the world is taught to the youngster. During this time, he discovers more about the world's soul. Learning to communicate with nature is an important part of his journey. So it's a good thing they were spies for the first rebel group, since a second group of rebels has them in custody and intends to kill them because they spoke to the first group, with whom this group is at war. The alchemist allays their concerns by handing them the entire boy's inheritance. A legendary alchemist who can transform himself into wind and demolish their camp, he informs them. They've given him 3 days to get the wind to do what he wants it to. The boy returns to the alchemist after spending days trying in vain. The alchemist informs him that he must complete the boy's quest. As a result of his actions, a massive storm forms and threatens to destroy the rebel base. It's not where he was before when the storm began, but on the other side of the camp now. Everyone else is terrified after that, with the exception of the alchemist and the general, who realized the youngster grasped the glory of God since he had found his perfect disciple. The youngster and the alchemist were allowed to leave with no further incident. There is an alchemist and a young boy at a monastery where they are to part ways. But first, the alchemist shows the boy how he can transform iron into gold. If he could, the child inquires. So why bother? After all, he wouldn't have to. Iron to gold was the alchemist's own personal legend, and he only intended to demonstrate its feasibility to the youngster and replace the boy's wallet by doing so. The discovery of the riches is essential to the youngster's personal legend. Alchemist splits gold into 4 portions. 1/4 of his gold is given to the monastery's monk, who claims it is more than the monastery had supplied for the impoverished in the first place. This time, the alchemist cautions him not to mention anything, or the universe will give him a smaller amount next time. As a result, when the boy contemplates declaring that the alchemist's 4th portion of money is also too much, he restrains himself. The alchemist then keeps 1/4 of the gold for himself and makes the monk keep the final 1/4 for the youngster if he returns. It's fortunate that he'll be able to use it. At long last, after making his way to the pyramids, the child is attacked by thieves once more as he begins to excavate where he believes the treasure is concealed. There will be no repeats of anything that has ever happened before. There will always be a 3rd time for everything. The boy had lost all of his money for the 3rd time. Before he met the rebels and criminals in Africa, he first met the young man. One of the robbers informed the child he was a fool for following the instructions in a dream after he had been beaten and learned of his treasure and where he had been digging. An abandoned church's hidden wealth had been a dream of his own, which had brought him to this particular site. Rather than searching for the wealth, the thief was fated to become a thief. The child came to the conclusion that the treasure he was looking for was located back home. We were able to laugh at the comedy of the situation, but the lessons learned from the trip were priceless. Alchemist's gold was left for him by a monk at a monastery. The youngster returns home and visits the abandoned church where he had been sleeping at the beginning of this story. After searching for the treasure, he discovers that it's just where he had slept and dreamed about it. The boy sets out to return to Fatima with his personal legend complete, after handing over 10% to the gypsy, that is, after finding his treasure. Platitudes and moral lessons abounded throughout this novel. What we've always dreamed of doing, our personal legend, is critical. It is important to not give up on our aspirations no matter how many hurdles we encounter along the way. When you want something, all the universe conspires. If you haven't read Paulo Coelho's book yet, it's worth the effort. Santiago, the boy, he is the protagonist of The Alchemist. In the beginning, he is merely referred to as a boy, and he is referred to as such for the rest of the book. It's his character that undergoes the most development. He's a shepherd at the beginning of the story. He wanted to be able to travel, so he became a shepherd. His parents intended him to be a priest, so they sent him to seminary. However, the youngster wanted to travel, so his father suggested he become a shepherd instead. He always had a book with him because he was a big fan of reading. He was a sophisticated thinker who mastered the art of observing and deciphering the signals of nature. Due to the fact that he spent a great deal of time alone with his sheep, he became fluent in the sheep's dialect. He sets out to hunt a treasure after having a dream about it. As he travels, he meets a variety of characters who help shape his personal legend and provide him with life lessons. After being a restless youngster, he matures into a mature young man. Melchizedek, when the boy meets him, he appears to be a bit of a hobo. His demeanor gradually changes as they converse. His name is King of Salem, according to Melchizedek. He goes throughout the world helping people discover their personal legends, or what they are meant to accomplish in their lifetime. Life gets in the way and we give up on our dreams, blaming it on fate, like we did as children. In order to help those in need, he tells the youngster, he will appear in various forms. He sees glimpses of Melchizedek in places and individuals throughout the novel when he is doubting his quest. He notices Melchizedek's gold-bejeweled breastplate when they first meet. Melchizedek then sends the youngster on a quest to find the riches, which is his personal legend, as the boy believes his story. 2 stones, Urim and Thummim, are pulled from Melchizedek's breastplate. In this case, the stones are white on one side and black on the other side. He promises the youngster that the stones will answer any questions he may have. Yes is denoted by black and nay by white. The Englishman. The boy meets the Englishman while waiting for a caravan to travel across the Sahara. When the Englishman arrives at the 200-year-old alchemist's home in England, he intends to learn the secret of making gold out of metals. He's eager to pick the alchemist's brain. Despite having studied alchemy for most of his life, the Englishman still can't get his head around it. He and the boy form a close friendship and ride camels together. In the alchemist's eyes, the boy's capacity to observe the world around him is inspiring. Together, they agree to share what they have learned. All the texts the alchemist in training has are read by the youngster, and the Englishman learns to listen to the world around him as a result of his time with him. Improve your state of calm. In the last time we see the Englishman, the brilliant alchemist, he must find his own path to the alchemy of turning metal into gold. Fatima, the girl Santiago falls in love with. She's a desert dweller at heart. The women have learned to wait for their husbands to get home. While the males are away, the ladies sit and wait. After a few weeks of daily meetings by the well, the boy eventually asks her to marry him. He's eager to make his life with her at the oasis. The sole condition is that he completes his personal legend before she will marry him. That he won't discover it now will make him sad in the future, she knows. As a result, she pledges to be there for him when he gets back. As a matter of fact, true love should never get in the way of dreams. The Alchemist, the best alchemist. He has been rumored to be nearly 2 centuries old. He is a guy of mystery since he wears all black and hunts with a falcon. After being introduced to him by the Englishman who is interested in becoming an apprentice, the reader learns the true alchemist's apprentice is none other than the little lad in question. Afterward, he instructs the boy in the art of listening to one's intuition and learning the universal language. His own personal legend, which is the Philosopher's Stone, which he manufactured, as well as his own elixir of life that saves him from getting sick or dying, are shown to him by the alchemist. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.